let's do it. It is past 9 o'clock, so the October 7th meeting of the Referrals Committee shall come to order. I think in the interest of not making this ridiculously complex, I'll just do the roll call. Councilmember Fleming. Here. Councilmember Revelle.
Here.
I'm here too. We're all here. We have a quorum. We're prepared to do our work. The next item on our agenda is public comment. Does any member of the public seek to give comment this morning? Okay, hearing none. The next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. The minutes are still in production, so my understanding is we will be able at our next meeting to vote to approve minutes, but that's still on the way. And that brings us to the actual item on our agenda, which is items for consideration. We do have one new referral to talk about, a referral from Councilmember Fleming, but I thought before we did that, both just in light of the fact that we haven't met for a little bit, that we've been sort of at this for a little while, and especially because we had a discussion about this at the Rules Committee, I thought it might be useful to just talk a little bit about where we are, where we want to go, and what needs to change to enable us to get there. I did bring some thoughts, but I want to first see if either Councilmember Fleming or Revelle wanted to share any either kind of reactions to the discussion we had at Rules on Monday, or just kind of requests or suggestions about how we do things moving forward.
Well, I guess I'd be interested in kind of a summary or assessment of where the referrals are that we have actually passed on to the various committees. How are we doing in terms of getting those referrals that we actually moved along? How are we doing? How are the committees doing in addressing those issues?
Yeah, I mean, so let me give a sort of short off the cuff answer, but I think the longer answer is that I think we need the spreadsheet and form that we have, I think needs a bit of an overhaul. But the answer is sort of not great. There are some referrals that were made and then just, I think, just literally not acted upon. One that comes to mind, which is in row 5 of the tracker, is the referral from Councilmember Kelly to halt city property tax levy increases for 2022. That sort of had a time limit on it, and that it just didn't happen. And I think
so ANPW talked about it a bit, but then that was it. Is that what you mean? Or
no, they just didn't at all, is my understanding. My understanding is that the replacement solution was to have in a memo presented to council a sheet that included some historical information about property tax levies, but there was not a committee discussion about this issue. Mm-hmm. So I think, and if I'm mistaken about that, someone should jump in. But that was my understanding based on a bunch of email traffic that I saw.
I think there was a tiny bit of discussion, because I can recall Councilmember Nusma saying something about not wanting not wanting to make that kind of a decision in the absence of understanding the full budget picture. And one could say, well, the fact that the committee asked for this historical information was sort of saying what we can't really have a thorough discussion about this until we have more information. So, but I agree. I mean, they didn't say, and then we'll talk about it at a future date, or it kind of was left definitely in limbo.
Got it. Okay.
Can you kind of add in something there?
Yeah, sure.
It's not about that one necessarily. So one, I think I have the only referral to review, which we can do, but I was going to actually say, like, maybe spend all of our time on how to actually get this process moving a little more than my referral, because I can also just kind of talk to staff about that one for now. But I will give an example. So I went back to check my email, and on August 24th, I sent an email to Councilmember Braithwaite and then the corresponding staff regarding the things we had moved out, I guess at the August 20th meeting or something. And, as best I can tell, and I'm not on APW, I don't think those things went anywhere. I did follow up with Sharon Johnson this morning about one of the things that's on here from the 20th, the disaggregating MWE data by race. And she did say she's kind of working on that. I think she said she had spoken to you, Daniel, and then also maybe to Bobby as well. So that one is in the process, which we can maybe update our thing here, as well as the human services things that Councilmember Burns had referred. I think all of them, maybe but one, we've already gotten to human services. But as I looked back on this chart, on the 22nd, I think, of July, and actually before we actually had a referrals committee, I made this referral to the city manager and to Councilmember Nguyen about the condo deconversion. And since that time, I've had a building, which I was very concerned about, that has been purchased by, developer or whoever. And the vote was to deconvert it from condos. And so now, I think per my last count, I have 8 families that are going to be displaced, including 3 seniors who had who had no mortgages on their condos. And I have no idea where they're going to go because our threshold of a vote in Evanston is pretty low. And a lot of people who were in the building were renters, and the property owners decided to sell. But that was the kind of thing that I had 2 at the time when I put the referral in, which I think was back in this calendar, was in July. One, they were able to the owners got together and decided to, not sell or however the model goes. But anyway, the long story of this is that I put the referral in because these things were happening and I was trying to get either in front of them or at least have us look at our policy, and it did not go anywhere. And so now we have several neighbors who are going to be displaced pretty soon, and we know there's nowhere else for them to go. And so it's pretty frustrating from that standpoint because that's a real tangible action we maybe could have taken, or at least had a discussion about before we have people who are going to be looking for affordable housing that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So I'd much rather spend our time figuring out how to get this process going than, the rating system for my new referral, because it's not really time sensitive.
Yeah, makes sense. Kelly had her hand up.
Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to add that a couple of the items off the referral tracker list have come off because they went to rules. So I worked with Councilmember Reed to get those on the last rules agenda, and a few more will be going to so we can update the list, and I can work with Alison on that.
Right. So there's, I think if we're looking at the things that we'd like to see improved, there's things that we take action on that just sort of don't go anywhere, that we'd like to better address that. Then there's, to your point, Kelly, there's things that sort of essentially get to bypass the referral process because the committee chair, in this instance, the chair of rules, just kind of plucks them out, which I think we sort of reached a near consensus in rules on Monday night that that's something that also I think we don't want to have happen. And then there's another sort of situation that I think we want to at least ask ourselves whether it's problematic, which is, and this is just, I happen to know it well because it's my referral. I made this referral about options to make downtown Evanston more walkable, and sort of the opposite problem from Cicely's problem happened. Like, it got instantly put on an agenda, so instantly that there was not any preparation. I showed up to the committee meeting and was kind of asked to present my own thoughts, but it really wasn't ready. And because it wasn't ready, there weren't any concrete next steps. And so I think we can ask ourselves, and there's multiple different reasonable answers here, but we might ask ourselves if we want to also try to track things to that extent to see if, even though they got on an agenda, it didn't necessarily facilitate any progress on the issue for whatever reason.
I guess I would have assumed that the item wouldn't just simply go on the agenda, but there would our, I would think we wouldn't have to say, oh, and by the way, please provide some discussion material for the committee or something. I mean, it.
Yeah, I would have thought so too. And I don't know if this is just like an overreaction to the referrals committee's awesome powers, or if it's because,
Yeah.
you know, the mayor sent an email asking, but I sent an email to the committee in question that I thought was very much like, hey, we approved this item to be considered, you know, whenever you're ready, put it on an agenda. It's something that I'd like to see happen, but it's not urgent. And then that was, for whatever reason, email was sent late in a week, and it wound up on an agenda early the following week, and there just
Wow.
wasn't time. And so I don't think it's necessarily, that's probably not the hardest problem to solve. It's in fact probably the easiest problem to solve. I just wanted to name it as something that has occurred. You know, we don't want this to be just kind of creating boxes to check, and then once the boxes get checked, we decide we're done. I mean, the goal is to facilitate the actual change making process. So I don't know. Does anyone have it? I have a few kind of things that occurred to me in the wake of Monday's evening that I'm happy to share. Is there anything? You know, I completely agree with Cicely that with Councilmember Fleming, that we need to have a better, I think both a better process, but also better rules for making sure that once we ask that something get addressed, that it get addressed in a reasonable time frame. But I also think there's some back end work on our end that can be done. So I don't know. Does anyone have any specific suggestions, or do you want me to just kind of launch into my thoughts?
Let's hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I have some suggestions, but I can bring them up after your thoughts. Maybe there's some of the same.
Okay, great. Well, so first of all, and you know, there was this sort of back and forth that happened on Monday evening at Rules. I think, you know, we seem to agree on Monday evening that the sort of cleanup language to make the rule officially read that we make recommendations about timing was a fine thing to do. I think we sort of reached agreement that, you know, items shouldn't be placed on agendas without the approval of the referrals committee. There was sort of a lot of confusion and back and forth, and I think the right way to write that is just to say that, to have language be totally neutral and not even use the word referral, but just say proposed policy changes don't make it on committee agenda until they've been approved by the referrals committee. And so that clearly applies to proposals made by staff, proposals made by elected officials, and it doesn't apply to the kind of administrative function of the government, or the you know, kind of approval of the executive function of the government. I get it, there would be some gray area there that would have to be litigated, but I think at least that language minimizes the likelihood of dispute. And then I think what we ought to say is that when the decision of the rules committee that something's ready to go is made, it gets immediately transmitted to the committee chair, who then immediately tells the rules committee what agenda it's going to be placed on. And I don't know that we immediately need to put a timeline in, you know, though if we enact that rule and we find out that they're often saying it'll be on an agenda in 6 years, then we'll have to put a timeline in. But I think to at least require a clear, concrete reaction with a specific date in it could really be a pretty important step here. I do think if we want to do that, we do need to actually start voting on things. I think it probably is a mistake for an action that has that level of bindingness not to come with a vote. And so I would ask that we, in that world, start voting on things. But then I think the other piece of all this that's really important is both that we clean up the tracker itself, but also the form that's utilized to make referrals, so that there's really enough information in there for everyone to move forward. And then I think perhaps the most critical thing about all this is that I think someone just needs to be kind of looking at the tracker, working with the people who made the referrals to ensure there's enough information in there, working with the committee chairs to ensure that things are moving forward. And this is where, again, I think the fact that we now have a policy coordinator in our shop is a real opportunity here. And so what I would recommend that we do is ask Alison to, by our next meeting 2 weeks from today, have a kind of an overhauled referral form and spreadsheet that'll be easier to utilize and easier to track, and then really assign to her the responsibility of being the go-between, both between us and the referrers as the referrals come in, and then more critically, probably between everybody on the committee chair and committee staff after the referrals go out, so that I mean, what I've found is that I'm trying to track all this, but the truth is that I'm sort of in a mad scramble the day before the referrals committee meets to sort of remind myself of what did we do 2 weeks ago and how much that got followed through on. And I think if it's really a specific person's job on an ongoing basis to keep track of that, we're gonna have a lot less risk of things just completely falling through the cracks. So those are my thoughts about what I think we ought to do. And I would be happy to draft, well in advance, well, I guess in advance of the next rules committee meeting, a draft of what that rule would look like, but for which I think the thing that was in the packet on Monday evening is a good starting point, and I could do that quickly to share with you guys. And Alison, as long as you're able to put together a revised referral form and spreadsheet by 2 weeks from today, then I would just say I'm curious as to what council members Revelle and Fleming think about this.
So I have a question. So how would you revise the form?
Alison, do you
Like,
want to?
what else is needed on the form?
So I see Alison unmuted herself and Kelly raised a physical hand, a non-digital hand. So let's Alison and then Kelly.
So I think it would just be a lot more prescriptive, and so instead of general questions, it would be much clearer about what people are trying to accomplish, if it's an item for discussion, if it's a policy change, if it's a resolution, if it's an ordinance, if there's a budget aspect to it, really be able to gauge through that form how fleshed out that idea really is. And if it's not very fleshed out, then I can go back to the person who's referring the idea and make sure that we get a little bit more information before it gets in front of you all, so that if you are voting, then you have all the information you need in order to actually vote up or down on something.
But and I know Kelly has a thing, but so even if they write it on there as a policy change, I think it is important to, and maybe this is something we do at the rules committee, to talk through just the process of things once they get on the agenda, because it seems to be like we've had a couple in here where people have said they wanted to be, for introduction and action at the meeting, or, if they write policy change, they still need to understand it's going to come first for discussion or introduction. It doesn't just go on as policy change. So those just might be good, like Robert's rules or whatever, for us to remind folks of.
Great.
Kelly, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, and I think Alison's right on the money. In my perfect world, there'd be some field forms that would have to be filled in so that staff could be very clear about what the referral is in total. Maybe even some other detailed information like discussed at a board meeting or discussed with certain stakeholders, whatever that is, so that we all know the information behind the referral as well. Because sometimes that's helpful when staff is looking to do additional research or trying to put together the most comprehensive agenda item. And I think it could be a real value to have Alison assist with all of this too, because she can, make sure that it's fleshed out for staff.
I have another another thought, because right now we've been trying to do that, Allison. And it's not always gone so well. But one thing I think, Kelly, for your office is, and you and Allison obviously can figure this out, but even once it's like flushed out, is how do we then like make sure it's on an agenda? Which, I mean, I guess is, I don't need an answer to that, but that's been our part, because we've been trying to flush things out and we give them to the, chair. And I've been trying to even give them to the staff, but I have no control over the agendas.
I think this is where maybe the rule kind of comes in as well. Mayor Biss was talking about looking at the rule and revising, but I think it would be helpful to have, for this committee to have a vote up or a vote down, and vote down meaning not down like it's never happening, but hey, we need more information, or there's some information missing that needs to be fleshed out before we can, I know you guys all have the green light, orange light system, but I think in just discussing the agenda with Councilmember Reed, that became a little confusing too, because he plucked some items off the referral tracker that were marked like orange. And I was like, well, did the referrals committee give that a green light? He's like, well, I'm just going to take it and put it on. So even I was confused, and it ended up going on the agenda anyway. But I guess these are the things that, like, we just had real solid, like, yes, this is approved by the referrals committee to move on to the next standing committee. That would be great. Or it's not approved yet because there's more information, so it'll be held to the next meeting until we can flesh out whatever information the referrals committee is looking for. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
It does. And let me just take ownership. I mean, the green light thing is done on the fly by me and was not a great idea. And we should just be honest about the fact that sometimes when I do things on the fly, they're unwise. And I do think what does a yellow light really communicate in that situation? It's just a weird thing. And I think it was just something that I'm happy to say, oops, let's do it. Let's do something just clearer moving forward.
Okay, I have another thought. So I am happy to report, though, based on looking at the referral tracker, I think there are some things that have moved off of here that we've maybe just not updated, and maybe everyone was aware of that, but and this is part of maybe my communication, right? Because as chair of human services, I'm probably much more like Councilmember Reed. I'm like, okay, we're going to take these things off the referral tracker, and then I realize I'm probably not doing my part to communicate with the mayor, like that we have discussed these things already. So I'm pretty sure that like the crime bulletin, which is line 9 on here, will be on the November Human Services Committee meeting. And I've already talked to the police about that. But on our little page here, it's listed as not scheduled. So, my bad for that one. The local hiring requirement, I've also sent over to MWEBE because that was my, liaison thing. I can check with Sharon. I think that one is like in process down there. The property standards complaint, which is line number 20, we have definitely, like Bobby has definitely talked about it. I don't know if it's actually been scheduled or it's come up as part of like other conversations. So maybe Allison, that's one for you to like follow up on specifically. But I know we've, done some conversation about it. Obviously my line number 23 here.
And that one maybe is going to the rental subcommittee.
Yeah. I know there's been conversation about it. Line number 23 is my referral that unless it happened in a week that I was not here, I don't think anything has happened with it. The same thing for 27, which was my referral. There was a couple more though that I know did happen because they're, again, in human services. The anti-displacement, which is line number 33, we had that last week or this week, I guess. And so Bobby's going to wants to start a subcommittee. So that one's in process. The same thing for the eviction notice in process at human services, already been talked about.
Right.
As I reported 36, Sharon says she's already working on an MWEBE. Victim Services Fund has not come to human services, but it was kind of in my mind for November, if we have time, because there's a lot of police stuff that's coming back. And that's it. So there are quite a few things that I was feeling pretty down about before I looked at the agenda and then realized that some things are actually moving along.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's both, of course, true and really, really positive. And also it also articulates some of what we need to work on, but it's a much better kind of problem to have, right? Like if we're not totally updating the tracker properly, like that's a solvable problem. If we're not communicating back to this committee about what progress is occurring, that's a solvable problem. Yeah, I mean, point very well taken.
So going forward, so for example, yesterday I had a conversation with Johanna Neiden about some of the items that have gone, that we have sent on to P&D. And she and I communicated about them a few weeks ago, and then I followed up, to get a little update. And so we have a game plan. But anyway, so in this new model going forward, I would report to Alison whatever I might have, and she would update the tracker then to reflect the status. Is that the idea? Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Great. Well, I am. Let me put on my homework list putting together a draft rule quickly, because if the rules committee is going to meet a week from Monday, then it would want to be, we'd want to have something for the packet, basically by this coming Monday.
Mhm.
So let me do that within 24 hours.
Mhm.
And Alison will get started on the form and spreadsheet. So you'll probably want to talk to Luke about there's probably some technology questions as well as some substantive questions there.
Mhm.
And I mean, I just state a fact of whatever it is, a temporobiological fact. Alison will be on parental leave relatively soon. So I think one goal that we should set is to kind of get to a place. We won't have enough time to like really get used to a new equilibrium before then, but I think we want to at least get to a place that we feel better about by then, so that when she comes back, we kind of know what we're doing.
And the referrals have, slowed down a little bit. So it gives us time to also figure out. And then as we get into like the budget discussions and all that, we'll probably be looking more at budget memos versus,
Right.
referrals.
Yeah.
So the other thing I thought about is if we met once a month, that might give people also a little bit of a better idea of how long it's going to take things to kind of get through our new system and then onto an agenda. We started aggressively because we were new, but it seems like now, if we didn't have all the other stuff to discuss, we would have had one referral today.
Mhm.
So maybe if we go to once a month, that just gives people a little bit of a better idea, like their things aren't cranking through
Yeah.
as fast, and then people maybe aren't as frustrated either.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that sounds good.
I totally agree. I mean, I think we, our initial concern was that we didn't want to be seen as a gatekeeper roadblock entity, and only meeting every month might just slow everything down in a way that would irritate our colleagues. But of course, the thing that's irritating our colleagues has nothing to do with how often we meet. It's much more about how effectively the system itself runs. And I think if we fix that and then dial down the meetings to monthly, it'll be a clear win-win for everybody.
Right. Well, I hope everyone is having perhaps a more realistic picture of just how much business can we as a council accomplish in any given meeting. So part of the problem was, we had this deluge of issues that everybody wanted us to talk about right away. And that's, just not, since we don't work 24 hours a day, that just wasn't possible.
Well, maybe that's the problem.
There we go. Right.
And I think we do work 24 hours a day.
I know it does seem like.
So Alison, I just rattled off a bunch of things that I think are in process too. Should I send that to you an email so that you're not?
Don't worry about it. We're recording this and
Get that.
I can go back and Don't worry,
Okay,
I got it all.
perfect.
Great.
Although Councilmember Revelle, maybe we should chat if you.
Oh, P and D, sure.
Yeah.
I'll send you an email, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Was there anything else folks want to discuss before we break?
Do we want to just do the one last referral? Or again, I'm actually, let's not do it as a referral. Why don't I talk to Johanna about it? Because it might just be something that, because I hear from several seniors, maybe it's just my ward and a few people and not necessarily a citywide issue. So, and I have been trying to encourage some of our newer colleagues to kind of talk to staff first before we make a referral that maybe isn't, it's something that can be kind of solved offline. So we'll hold on that one. We'll leave it in the spreadsheet if that's okay. And I'll talk to Johanna and she can let me know if it needs to be like a full referral or if it's just 2 people.
Okay.
Great. And I do think that's, I think, the more we can keep the referrals process for policy changes that are likely to end in a resolution or an ordinance and keep just sort of information gathering conversations as information gathering conversations, I think the happier everyone's going to be in the long run.
Yeah, and I think Kelly can, be helpful with that with her, new role in communications with council members directly. So I shared this, a lot earlier. My first term information flow was very selective. And so if we can get past that, then I think people, have more faith in like being able to get their questions answered versus feeling like I have to make a referral in order to get information.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, just for the record, I'm happy to put everything on any agenda and see it through, but that, I think what we've seen is we don't get to all of it anyway in the committees, and it gets left over, and then there's information that needs to be, looked at. And so I think, like, I really appreciate you all talking through this process today, because I think this sounds like this will be way more efficient.
Beautiful. Well, thanks everyone. I have my marching orders, and I think we have an improvement plan in place. And given that,
So are we going to meet then next a month? Are we going to monthly meetings? Is that our game
I
plan?
would say let's not do that yet, given the number of things we want to change before Alison leaves.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Right. If we go to monthly meetings, we may not have any more before Alison leaves, though I think we probably would, but we'd have 1 or 0. Whereas I think it's better for us to try to get 2 more in and then go to monthly. So our next meeting.
Are we thinking these things are going to come to rules in November? I guess that's the next rules meeting, right? Or Kelly,
No, remember,
we have one in a couple of weeks.
yeah, the rules.
That agenda is pretty full already, but there should be a December, the first Monday in December, I think would be the next logical meeting after there, the next regular meeting, I should say.
Well, and I'm obviously not dogmatic about this. The intent, I thought, as we left this past Monday, was to come back on the 18th and basically ratify what we had discussed. The claim at the time being that it wouldn't take a lot of conversation, which is always an ambitious claim to make with the city council these days. So my proposal is to present to y'all and Councilmember Reed and Dar and Kelly very quickly execution of what we've been talking about that could be voted on the 18th, and if it gets bumped off the agenda, it gets bumped off the agenda.
Yeah, I think it's still on the agenda, so the same
Yeah.
rule is still, so I think it's still there.
Okay. Beautiful. Anything else? All right. Well, seeing nothing further to come before the referrals committee, we stand adjourned. Our next meeting is October 21st at 9 a.m. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.